I'm looking forward to a fabulous retirement, but what I'll do the next day is anyone's guess. This is a common fear that we hear from many in our community.
Exactly. And folks, it doesn't need to be this way. This is Queer Money episode 549. And today we're going to show you how to estimate how much money you will need to have different flavors of retirement.
Let's get on with the show. With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One, N.A., member FDIC.
Welcome back, folks. Now, if you are just catching this video and you're introduced to us for the first time, we're going to discuss some things that we talked about in last Thursday's episode when we were talking about step one. And in that, we broke down what retirement could look like potentially into various buckets: basic, happy, and fabulous. And those will be the foundation for what we're going to show you today. So if you haven't watched that, or you haven't done the exercise that we encouraged you to do, please go back and watch that and do that exercise. It will really help inform how you will come to the numbers that you will come to, and how we came to the numbers that we came to in this video.
Exactly. And as some of our previous episodes, this episode might be easier to understand if you're able to watch the video. We'll provide the YouTube link in the podcast player. But remember, the episode on YouTube only goes live at noon, or you can simply wait till you go home in the evening and then you can watch it again. We're going to share one of our most popular tools, which is our spending analysis that we use with clients. But typically, that does a look back at somebody's spending behavior so you can figure out how to tack going forward. Today, we're going to actually version that a little bit and do what we call future casting, a new word I came up with, where we're going to actually see what we can do, what our retirements could look like in those three flavors: basic, happy, and fabulous. So go ahead and listen to this, but it might be easier to watch this. So you want to come back later. All right, so this is our spending analysis that, as we said earlier, we typically share with clients so we can do a review of their historical spending. But we're kind of versioning this now to do a future cast of what retirement could look like. And we're providing real world analysis for David and me that you can, obviously, it's going to be different for you, but we want to give you a real world experience so that you can follow along. So, David, when you decided to start this analysis, what did you start with? Basic, happy, or fabulous, and why?
I started with basic, and the primary reason I started with basic is one, I think it's easier for us to all grasp what a basic retirement would look like based on our current lifestyle. And also, I like going up rather than going down when it comes to thinking about where our financial picture is going. So I'm going to start with basic, move to a better place, and then move to the fabulous place.
Okay, so I see numbers on here. Please explain them to me.
Yeah. So what I did is I go, if you go back to remember that what we looked at last week, we said, come up with these major expenses that you will have in your lifestyle in retirement. And so I took those major expenses and I plugged them in
that
here.
we all discussed last week.
Yes, right. So you have your list of your major expenses. So for us, auto was one of those, dining out is another, entertainment is another, right? And I took and I said, what would a basic amount of money that we would spend today on that category to feel like we were
not destitute, but
right,
we're not large and in charge.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so that's what I plugged in here. So that $3,000 that we see here for under auto maintenance is actually all of our auto. It's maintenance, insurance, gas, all of that.
Not necessarily including a new car, because we probably wouldn't get a new car.
Exactly. With it averaging out to $250 a month, there clearly isn't room there for us to have a major or a car payment at all. So that to me is a basic, right? Same thing with dining, right? Dining, $333 a month or $4,000 a year isn't a lot. I mean, we probably have spent more than that on some weeks in our current lifestyle, but spread out over a month, I think that would be a basic retirement.
$4,000 a year, probably pretty basic. Yeah.
Exactly. So the same thing with all of these other categories like entertainment, groceries, a gym membership is actually all of our exercise. And really, that $83.33 a month is basically just covering a gym membership and maybe some gym clothes from time to time. Our major categories here: health insurance and our mortgage and rent. Those categories, as well as maybe even vacation, but those categories are probably some of our larger spends. Healthcare, the $15,000 number that we have here, folks, is a number that we came up with when we were working with our financial advisor, that we think that's about what we would be spending. The average couple today, if they're 65 years old and are retired, they're spending anywhere from about 12 to data shows they're spending about 12 to $13,000 a year on their healthcare expenses. So we're just slightly above that. I think that's in part because we just know our own physical health, as well as where we would be living and the cost of insurance. Mortgage, rent, that really isn't mortgage or rent, because in a basic, we are still living here in Toledo. We're still living in our duplex. We're renting one side of it. We don't have a lot of expenses. So it would keep that $1,000 is more than just mortgage and rent. That's all of our living, our housing expenses. So that includes things like maintenance and taxes and yard and all that kind of stuff is wrapped up in that $1,000. But we're still basic because we're still living here in Toledo in a duplex.
$1,000 a month, $12,000 a year for us to stay where we're currently living.
Yeah. And then vacation, we already said travel is important to us. That $5,000 a year is really the 1 to 2 vacations that we would take throughout the year.
Okay, so obviously we have other expenses here, right? Because we're going to have utilities, heat and electricity, phone, probably we're going to need clothing while we're in retirement. How are you factoring that in?
Well, if you see, we have the total there of $54,000, right? That $54,000 number is actually our total for the whole year of these major expenses. The mission of Queer Money is to financially empower the LGBTQ plus community. Join us in thanking Capital One for supporting that mission. So if you go over into what we were looking at last week, these expenses, they aren't all of the expenses. So I took that $54,000 and I basically said, I think that makes up close to 75% of our expenditures. So I'm multiplying that by 1.25 or 25%, and I'm coming up with $67,500. I think that would be a more clear picture. All of the other expenses there, like spending money on local charities, spending money on clothing from time to time, spending money on all those things that happen throughout the year that aren't a regular monthly expense. That's what that other 25% would basically make up.
Okay, and obviously Uncle Sam's going to want their mittens on our money. What factor that in?
So then I added 15% on top of this. So again, multiply that by 1.15 or 15%. I think that 15% would cover the taxes for the tax bracket I think that we would be in if we were living at this basic level. And that means that we would basically have costs around $77,625. I round this number up. I round that number up to 80,000. I round the number up to the nearest 5,000. So if you look at this, here is the picture of what we gave last week of our location or major expenses, the kinds of activities, that income amount that we would need to cover a basic retirement for us is $80,000 in today's dollars. Right?
Okay, so then did you calculate happy next? And if so, how?
Exactly. So the next thing I did was happy. Now basically what I did is I looked at all of those major expenses and I said to myself, okay, how would those change if we were living at the happy level of retirement? This is a little bit bigger life. Well, probably the biggest change there you see is that our location moved from Toledo and being in a duplex to being in a condo or a home in Denver that has a pool, has a garage, and has walkability. So I know that our housing expenses would go way up. And that's $24,000 we're adding there, because we will most likely have either a house payment or rent or HOA or things like that. I also tacked on into some of those other categories. You see our travel category went up because our travel went from three to
Traveling more.
Right. One to two times a year to 3 to 5 times a year. So all of those categories I bumped up a little bit more into a level where I think like this is where we're actually having a little bit of fun with our lifestyle.
We're joining the gym, we're going to yoga, we're hiking and biking.
Yeah, exactly. So you see I went through the same process. And so our major expenses are $112,000. Now, that's very different than the total income amount down there. So when I have the $112,000, I again multiplied that by the 25% or 1.25, and that gives us $140,000. Then I multiplied this by 1.2 because I think we will be in a higher tax bracket, right? We'll have more expenses. So that gives us $168,000, and again I rounded that up to 170. So that's the happy. Now, how
What's
about that
behind door number 3?
Right, exactly.
Fabulous.
The fabulous, right? Again, everything increases here. Our major expenses go way up. Our housing goes significantly higher because we would then be living in Denver and have either a condo or a house in Seachez, which is walking distance to the beach, a view of the ocean. And again, drop down all those categories, right? Our travel didn't go up that much. And that's in part because if we have a home in Denver and we have a home in Seachez, we're probably going to be doing a fair amount of local travel with those two locations. But everything else kind of ticks up a little bit, or some of them significantly. And again, we come up with our major expenses being $164,000. So if we go do our calculation of $164,000, I took that number again, multiplied it by 1.25 or 25%. That's our overall spending. Then this time I multiplied this by 1.22 or 22% to put us in another slightly higher tax bracket. That amount comes out to $250,000. Now, instead of rounding it up by $4,900, I just actually rounded that down to the $25,000. And it looks like I have a
Looks like
typo.
$25,000 knockout, but it's actually supposed to be $250,000. Okay.
Right. So that's how I come up with all of the numbers to help us see what would it take financially for us to actually have a basic, a happy, and a fabulous retirement.
Well, let's work towards that fabulous retirement.
And we're back in our normal seats.
Power of magic, right? So that's your second assignment. Start estimating what you will need for your basic, your happy, and your fabulous retirement. And as David said, your major categories might not be the same as ours. And if you do have the same major categories, you're likely going to have different price points for yours. So this is really personal. It's not an exact science. It's kind of an art. You have to do a little bit of homework, maybe have a conversation with some people, maybe your partner, do a little bit of Googling. Basically, that's your homework assignment for this week. Figure out how much you're going to need in each of those categories: basic, happy, and fabulous. Share your questions, thoughts, or comments, or what you're finding out in wherever you're catching this episode, whether it's YouTube or you want to comment through Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Always email us at info@queermoneypodcast.com, or you can simply reply to the Queer Money newsletter. Also want to let you all know that we are going to be hosting a retirement chat soon. It's a free chat just to kind of gauge how everybody's feeling, talk about questions, concerns that people are having, and figuring out how we can all help each other a little bit more. So look out for that coming soon.
Capital One Auto Navigator does more than just auto financing. We're here to help you find a car you love, too. Shop millions of cars from thousands of dealers nationwide. Research your favorite makes and models. Explore dealers near you and more. All on Auto Navigator.
Thank you for joining us for another episode. Make sure you come back next week when we discuss step number 3, funding your retirement.
Until next time, stay fabulous. Bye.